fickle, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, that is right. So we are live here on a Monday night on the first SNL off week of season 49. And that means it is our first SNL feedback show of the season. My name is Jon from the SNN. Very excited to answer your questions tonight, which, if you're just joining us for the first season of coverage, it's really, really a fun show that we do here where you get an opportunity to send in your questions and we will talk about whatever you want from season 49. We're also going to have some of our patrons join us on the show. They'll call in and join us for 15, 20 minutes, talk about some things from the season that they want to talk about, answer some questions as well. And if you've ever want to appear on one of these shows, this is the show to do it on, where you can join us. So register at patreon.com/the SNL Network and you can come talk about SNL as well. But joining me to co-pilot for this podcast is the great Sammy K. So Sammy, how are you?
Jon, I'm doing well. I was telling you earlier, I think this is my first time on the Patron Feedback Show, which is very exciting because there's, not too many shows outstanding left on the network that I have not made an appearance on. So excited to chat with some patrons.
What else happened you appeared on?
That's a great question. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the last Infinity Stone. I've been on an SNL Story, been on, Hollywood Dish when we used to do that show. Obviously the Superfan takeovers. I don't know. You tell me if I'm missing anything. Oh, you know what I haven't been on? I haven't been on the debate show. I haven't been on
Point Counterpoint.
Yeah, which honestly sounds scary to me because those guys, TJ and Andrew, they're vicious when it comes to debating about things on SNL. And I'm just like, yeah, no, I have my opinions, but more of a round table type of guy than a debater. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll see myself in that arena.
Yes, I feel like once you get on all the shows, you can retire from the SNN. But until then, you can't.
Yeah, so don't put me on that show yet because I'm not ready to retire. Still got at least make the season 50, just like Keenan.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're headed towards there. We have completed the first 3 episodes, the first episode block of season 49, and we are headed towards 2 more episodes coming up. So first up, we got Timothée Chalamet and Boy Genius. Did I say that properly? Timothée Chalamet and Boy Genius this weekend. There you go. Coming up. So that will be exciting. So I'm sure we're going to get some news about that episode coming out during the week. And then we just found out this morning that Jason Momoa is coming back for his second episode hosting the show with musical guest Tate McRae. So, Sammy, are you excited for Jason Momoa to come back to host the show?
Yeah, I mean, Jason Momoa is like a big personality, and I honestly don't have a ton of memorable moments from his first appearance on the show, like as far as amazing sketches or anything like that. But I do remember.
I love the pre-tapes. The pre-tapes were very good.
Can you refresh my memory on the pre-tapes?
Yes. So there was the one where the girl had okay. I don't know if I'm gonna describe it as well because I only watched it once when it actually aired. But someone brought her boyfriend home to meet the parents for the first time, and Jason Momoa was trying to find him in the house and catch him, and I think it was Beck. And then he was like, "You can't catch me." And there was a whole. It was and it was very, very funny.
Yeah, and then that rings a bell. Yeah,
yeah. We were not covering the show at the time, so give us some grace here.
Yeah.
But then, and then the GE Big Boy appliances, which was that was pretty big.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, definitely, he is somebody who has a big personality. Honestly, when this might be a very kind of crazy connection, but. When Travis Kelce hosted the show last season, during his monologue, and again, everyone knows I'm not a big sports guy, but I was getting Jason Momoa vibes from Travis Kelce. They have these kind of big brass sort of personalities. And, I'm kind of excited to see him, bring that back to SNL. And I feel like, you've mentioned on the show recently how you like to see, hosts come back when the cast is kind of changed up. And even though it was only a couple of years ago, there's been major changes to the cast ever since, the last time he hosted. So I think, I'm very excited to see him kind of, play around with, some of the newer cast and, see what he's able to bring to the show.
Yeah, every 5 years seems like a very good time to bring back a host. Like if you're going to bring back a host into the Five Timers Club or more than 5 times, like I would love to see them every 5 years. I feel like that's like the right time if they're a really good host. And I think for all intents and purposes, like Momoa is a good host. He hosted during like a time when all the episodes started to clump together due to all the Trump stuff that was happening. So it's sort of hard now to parse through all those episodes. I think if, 10 years from now, we go do a rewatch of, the back half of 43, 44, and 45, I think you'd be able to parse through those better. But for us, it's like sort of feels all the same. But I'm excited to see that. I do want to kick things off for the show with our first question. So basically how the show works is that we put out a form right before the show, maybe a day before, maybe earlier in the day. And it's a Google form, and you can send in your questions and we'll read them out on the show if they are, at least reasonable, and we will talk about what you think. And if you still want to ask questions, like let's say you are watching us live and you missed filling out the form, you can put your questions in the chat. We'll try and get to as many as we possibly can tonight. But I do want to talk about this question first, which was a question that came in from our friend Kylie, who asked us, what do you think of the trend of all male hosts? I think we are long overdue for some females, so curious for your thoughts. So look, I'll start first on this, Sammy, and then I'll let you go. 5 hosts in a row to kick off the season, all men. If you know me and you know the show, I love Saturday Night Live. I do this. I'm so passionate about it, and we've made some great friends at NBC, and we have some really good connections to the show. But I think I would be doing a huge disservice to our listeners if I don't say how awful I think it is that 5 episodes into the show, there hasn't been a woman that's been booked to host the show. I know personally behind the scenes that they were trying a few names that were women to host the show. So, I know that they're trying, but I just think under no circumstances can you have the season start with 5 men hosting in a row. I really genuinely think it is a mark on the season when you do something like that. It shows the fans that maybe the show isn't for everybody. And you've done such a good job as a show to diversify the cast, to make people feel like it's achievable to one day perhaps get on the show. To then book the host this way, I think like undercuts a lot of that. So I just want to be fair when I say that. And I also think that there is like, wrongfully so, like there is the stereotype that women aren't funny that I think that has, been something that's been discussed for generations at the show. And I think you perpetuate that stereotype when you book so many episodes in a row hosted by men to say that, women aren't as good as hosting SNL. And again, I apologize to our friends who work at the show who I know really love the show and make it out of love most of the time. But I just think this is a really, really crazy thing that's happening here. So I had to express my thoughts on it tonight. What do you think?
Yeah, wouldn't it be funny if I just like went the other way? I was just like, actually, you're wrong, John. This is why. No, obviously, I echo everything you said. It's very disappointing. I mean, that was like the first thing. I feel like when we talked about it, offline, when I found out that Momoa was hosting, I'm like, cool, Momoa's great. Where are all the female like hosts? Where are they? And just like looking at kind of the calendar, and I know, and I feel like it's still kind of unclear, like things are weird with like the strike and everything, and I don't know how that's affecting booking or is not affecting. And clearly Timothée Chalamet and Jason Momoa are both actors in the Screen Actors Guild who have movies coming out, so maybe it's not affecting it that much. But like somebody who I was really hoping would host in this set of shows is Rachel Zegler, who's the star of the new Hunger Games movie. Like she's somebody who I think is so talented, is like a star on the rise, like is totally the type of person, similar to when Jennifer Lawrence hosted for the first Hunger Games movie. That's just like, oh, it's just kind of a slam dunk.
We didn't talk about her, by the way, like behind the scenes, Rachel Zegler. Is it Zegler or Ziegler?
I think it's Zegler. I'm not sure. I don't think we've ever talked about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Unless that's something
she was asked to host the show and said no. So I know that.
Oh, that's kind of surprising. She seems like, she's like a theater person. I know that's not always like a one-to-one thing, but all right, whatever. So they asked her. So at least they're asking the right people, but maybe they need to be asking more people. Like I don't know. Clearly, it seems like they've tried, but I feel like they could probably try a little harder, because I think there's a stat, and you probably know the stat. Like, this is the first time that a season started with like all like male hosts in like 10 plus years, 15 years, like something like crazy like that, like 20 years, like.
Yeah, so let me get the data on this. And this is like not the type of data that we put on social media, but maybe it's more podcast
Yeah.
data. But yeah, our team here, I just want to thank our team for like sending me this stuff. Yeah, first time since season 23 that we're going to go 6 episodes into the season without getting a woman hosting the show. So that was the
That's
6th episode of season
crazy.
23, hosted by Claire Danes. If you then before that, if you don't count season 23, so that happened once, I guess, like 26 years ago. And then before that was season 10, where they went to 10 episodes before the first
Wow.
one host. So like, yeah, we're living in like a different world now. Anyways, I said my piece on it, but we have a long show. We have lots of questions to answer, and we also have some great patrons who are going to join us. So I'm going to bring in the first one who will be a part of the conversation tonight. And let me bring in my man, Eric, on stage here. So Eric, how are you?
Hey, John. Hey, Sammy. How are you guys?
Hey. How's it
Good.
going?
Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. I'm actually watching through season 10 right now, and I'm right in the middle of that all male stretch. So
yes,
semi-relevant.
All men that's season 10.
All men
season
10,
men.
Yeah. And I think like 3 female cast members. I don't remember, but that's pretty low as well. But
yeah. So what do you think about Momoa being booked to host the show?
Momoa, I'm fairly excited about. Kind of like Sammy, I don't remember too much from that episode. There's one sketch where I think someone breaks through a wall, but that's all I remember from Momoa, really.
Yes. Yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm definitely like, when I do research before the week, I always rewatch the episodes like of the previous episodes that I hosted. That like I say, Momoa hosted. So I'm gonna rewatch that episode, and then Chalamet's I'll watch as well this week. But yeah, I'm excited to see what he's gonna bring to the show. Besides look, it's not Jason Momoa's fault that he is a man and was booked to host the show. Like, let's make that pretty clear. Like, we don't have to send hate to Jason Momoa. We don't have to send hate to SNL either. We could just give our opinions, which is I do think that women should host the show, and I know that there will be a woman hosting the show in the fall. I know that for a fact. So great. Like, it's not like I know we're not going to go season 10 all the way to the new year without having a woman host the show.
Yeah, and we did have 4 at the very end of last season, so we at least got a sort of record on the other side. So not the right way to even it out, but
yeah.
If you look at the last 9,
let's hope this is the last time we have to have this conversation about this, for sure. But Eric, so I would love to know so we have a bunch of questions that came in, so we could start to get into that. We could also talk about some of the things that I know you had messaged me that you want us to talk about tonight. But I do want to ask you your overall thoughts on season 49, how you're enjoying this season so far. Yeah,
I'm enjoying it pretty well. Definitely a step up from this time last season in terms of enjoyment. I was not crazy high on the Pete episode when I first watched it, and I actually wasn't that high on the Nate Bargatze episode either when I first watched it, which I think is pretty counter to popular opinion. But the Bad Bunny episode I thought was amazing. I think that was easily my favorite of the season, one of my favorites of the last couple of years. I just think every sketch there, with a couple exceptions, really brought something different and were funny to boot. So yeah, feeling pretty good so far.
I definitely say that Bad Bunny episode, we're going to always remember it because it was so unique and had that different, flavor to all of the sketches. So I think if that's what you look for in the show, I know, Eric, like you said, you're watching old seasons. So you're, I was where you were, like your brain is all SNL all the time. Mm-hmm. So whenever you get a host that comes in that does something a little bit different, it's always exciting. So I could resonate with your thoughts on the Bad Bunny episode for sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so let's talk about, well, why don't we start by answering a question, since we do have a bunch of questions that came in. So I'll read this out to you, and we'll have Sammy and Eric give their thoughts on these questions. So let's start with our question here from Blood Meridian, who is a great patron and friend of the show, who asks, he says, I've been enjoying this young season of the show a lot more than the previous one, even when I understand that many remain higher on 48 than me. So my question for you is, what are your hopes for the cast this season moving forward? I hope that JJ and Andrew continue their quality good years, and for Punky to continue to be a quiet stalwart of the show, and for hopefully the fun, silly concepts that were aplenty in the first run continue to move ahead. The mostly good cast use with vets and newer players getting turns to shine was a pleasant surprise this year. So, Eric, what are your hopes for the cast this season moving forward?
I think my first thought is that I really want to see some of the newer players stepping up to the anchor roles. They've had a lot of them in bit parts throughout this season, but really they've had Keenan and Mikey and Bowen to an extent kind of anchor everything in terms of, guiding the sketch along. I think that it's, probably past due time that some of the newer cast members learn how to do that. I guess Marcelo did it pretty well in Bad Bunny. But that's something I want to see. And I think for this season, more than last season and more than any season I've seen, I'm sort of ready for like a full refresh. Like I'm ready to see, anyone who's there 4 years and less, like really hop up. Anyone who's there 4 years and more, say, maybe step back a bit. So, I want to see them all step up in the anchor perspective, and then just in general, more of a refresh.
Sammy, what about you? After 3 episodes, do you have any hopes for the cast?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think Eric, you're like right on the money there as far as like, wanting kind of the newer players to be able to step up. I do feel like, there was a while where, we kind of had sketches that it felt like, they're trying to shove as many people in the cast in as possible. And I feel like we've kind of, retreated from that over the last, couple episodes, or maybe last season. And I do feel like I'm missing, a bit of that sort of, large ensemble type of sketches where you kind of get to see, this whole cast kind of interact with each other. Or if it's not the whole cast, just, being able to see kind of people from, different ends of, the Mikeys and Keenans and kind of featured players who are newer kind of interact and kind of, mesh together. So I think, I don't want, a whole show where, you're kind of putting in as many, cast members in as possible. But I do kind of miss, kind of that cohesion and kind of seeing those different pairings together. And I feel like sometimes you would get that from, and I'm sure, we're going to get debate sketches soon. So, maybe, we'll be getting some of that flavor, coming up. But I do feel like the cast is somewhat segmented, and I'd like to see a little bit more kind of blending together of the kind of eras within this cast.
I'm going to disagree with you, Sammy, because I think that once every 3 episodes, maybe if you want to do like, go through zany characters from all the cast or go through impressions from all the cast, I can understand that a little bit to see a little bit more cohesion. But I cannot remember a sketch with the entire cast in it, or most of the cast in it, that I've enjoyed in the last few years. I think that all the sketches that I've really liked have been a few people and really focusing on some like really like fleshing out like somebody's personality in a sketch to the point where we can analyze it. And I don't know. I can't see it where I really want more of that.
Yeah, I guess, and I'm really struggling to remember like the exact sketch, but I feel like in the last season or two there was some sort of like town hall-esque sketch where it felt like a lot of different cast members kind of got to have a moment. And I know sometimes, especially in cold opens, like, during like the Trump era and stuff like that, that those things could, become overlong and overstuffed and last like, 8, 9, 10 minutes, which as far as like a sketch goes, you're not going to get like a rhythm down or timing or anything like when those are the case. But I do feel like there is, a different kind of sketch that does incorporate kind of, more people into it that I think as much. And I think this is just like, a small adjustment. I don't think I want, the show to kind of take this, and fully, do things differently. Because I do like kind of the sketches we have been getting, but just being able to, see kind of different, machinations of the cast together. And, you never know, you could see kind of 2 people pop together in those situations. And, maybe they're going to, try to take that energy into, future episodes. So it's just trying to, make it to where, you're not just having, the older cast be together, just trying to get all the flavors together in the pot.
Yeah, I think the answer to this question for me, Blood, is like, I really hope that Sarah Sherman becomes more involved in the season. I think 5 sketches through 3 episodes is way too little, Sarah, for me. I don't know what type of box that she's being placed in, because I think, yeah, maybe you didn't love the weekend update that she did, but seriously, like, she is so talented. About a year ago, we were talking about her being this generation's star, and I don't know what's happened. Like, why isn't she on the show more? So that one is a weird one to me, because like Eric, you were saying, like, you want the younger cast to like rise, and you want the older cast to maybe take a step back. I think Sarah's like right in that sweet spot. Like, her and JJ are like where they're really, as first year repertory players, where like they're supposed to take over the show. And JJ is definitely doing that. But we were talking so many times on the podcast about like how Sarah was doing even more than JJ. So for me, like, that's the one that I'm thinking about with the big question mark moving forward.
I agree to some extent. I think Sarah, though, has made, I mean, this is kind of what she always does, but she's made a bigger impression, I think, than almost any of the other cast members this year already, just with her 5 sketches. Like, when I think back at just the 3 episodes we've seen a lot of cast members, in sort of bit or utility roles. We've seen Marcelo lead, we've seen Mikey lead, we've seen Keenan lead. And then other than that, there's just been a lot of like showpiece sketches for the rest of the cast members. And Sarah's had basically 3. She's had the Glamgina, she had a weekend update piece, and she had the Fran Drescher. So I think, like, as far as that goes, the numbers are low, but I think she's doing pretty well, at least in these first 3 episodes.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, Eric, you wanted to talk a little bit about the YouTube numbers, right? After the first 3 episodes, some of the sketches.
Yes, sir.
All right, so tell me, you sent me 2 graphs. Which one did you want me to put up first?
Can you do the top 10 one first?
Sure. So let's do that. So we're going to bring up, so this is, Eric sent me this prior to the show. So these are the top 10 from the last few seasons. So
yeah,
after 3 episodes. So make sure this is the right one. And this is the right one, Eric?
that's it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I could zoom in if you need me to as well. So just so we can make sure that people who are watching on YouTube can see that. So basically what we're looking at here is the views after 3 episodes on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. So I frequently pull the views from all of the SNL clips on YouTube from their playlists, from the individual episode playlists. And I started doing this last year. But this year, what I've wanted to do is start comparing the sketches from this season to the sketches from last season, sort of at the same points in time. So what I've pulled here is I've pulled the top 10 sketches so far this year as of yesterday. And then I've also pulled the top 10 sketches from the first 3 episodes of last season as of October 23rd, 2022, which was also 7 days after the Megan Thee Stallion episode, which was the 3rd episode. So both of these sort of sets of numbers are comparing basically 1 week out from the 3rd episode of the season. And
so are there any trends that you noticed?
Yeah, sort of the main trend is that this season, the sketches are having way more views. So I'll list out the top 8 of this season so far. From top to bottom, it's I'm Just Pete, Deion Sanders and Weekend Update, Washington's Dream, Jada Pinkett Smith on Weekend Update, Protective Mom 2, Fox NFL Sunday, Jim Jordan, Cold Open, and then the Nate Brickhouse monologue. All 8 of those videos have over 2.37 million views, and they all have more views than the number 1 sketch from season 48, first 3 episodes, which was Try Guys at this point last year. The Try Guys sketch had 2.3 million views. So the I'm Just Pete, just for example, has over 6 million. The Deion Sanders is over 4 million. Several of the other ones have over 3 million. So just like way more views going on this year. I don't know if it's something on the marketing side or if people are just more excited about SNL, but just seeing, how much better the sketches are doing from a sort of viewership perspective is getting me excited.
Yeah, I have a theory on this, Sammy. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think that this has a lot to do with the fact that there was the writer's strike and the SAG strike. So there's not new primetime television for the most part on the major networks. So except for like reality TV and sports, SNL is really the only show that's creating new content right now. And I think as a result, the episodes are bringing in more viewers, and so are the sketches. Like we posted online on Monday, I got, or was it like some point last week, I got an email from NBC that said that Nate Bargatze's episode was the most viewed episode since Steve and Marty last year, which like I would never have bet on, like just based on the fact that Nate Bargatze wasn't the biggest name booked. So for me, I think that they're getting a lot more eyeballs on the show now. Do you agree, Sammy?
Yeah, I think you're totally on the money there, and I think they've really have a good momentum going as far as like you book Pete Davidson as your season premiere host, obviously a huge name. You have a viral moment with the "I'm Just Pete" sketch, and I feel like it kind of wakes people up to the idea of like, oh yeah, SNL's back, and there's something new that is current. Because even when these strikes come back, there's still going to be a long tail to where they have to film and write and create all these new programs. So there was certainly an opening for SNL to kind of come back and be basically besides like the late night shows, the other talk shows, like the only kind of new thing that people can and watch and enjoy and share. And I think you kind of build off of that momentum from Pete to Bad Bunny, who is another huge name, and then Nate Bargatze, who I feel like is definitely a smaller name than those two, but in certain areas of the country, like he's like a huge stand-up. It's kind of going for a different audience. So as much as we would like to see SNL change up their hosting booking, I mean, so far it feels like what they've done is yielding big engagement and viewership. So
Yeah, and I see this too, Eric, by the way, in our views, because we like sometimes we'll select a sketch, like pictures from a sketch to be our thumbnails for the different podcasts that we do. And we chose Washington's Dream because it was a sketch everybody really enjoyed. So we put that as the roundtable, and we got more views on the roundtable, I assume, because people were interested in that sketch and wanted to hear us talk about it. So for me, I think it's a fascinating conversation to have. Did you notice any other trends that you want to point out here?
Probably not in this this graphic. If you flip to the other one,
Sure. Yeah, I'll put that up on screen for all of you. So we have a second graphic that Eric sent us, and I will grab that now. So here it is up on screen.
Thanks. So this one, to those audio listeners, is using the same data as the previous graphic, but I've averaged the sketch views from the 3 episodes from season 48. So Miles Teller, Brendan Gleeson, and Megan Thee Stallion, and then the 3 episodes from this season. And I've also broken them down between the different types of sketches. So the cold open, monologue, live sketch, pre-tape, weekend update, guest, and then weekend update news segment, and then musical guest. If you're looking at this on YouTube, you can clearly see what the trends are here. But for those who can't see it, basically the sketch average from this season has doubled the sketch average from last season if we compare the same points in time. Thus far, Pete Davidson has had the highest average. A lot of that is due to the I'm Just Pete pre-tape, which had over 6 million views. But on average this season, they're around 1.5 million. Last season, they're around 860,000. So also some general trends here. The cold opens tend to do the best. That's pretty normal. Although as you sort of move further out in time from the episode air date, the cold opens don't really get that much more views, but the rest of the sketches do. And then the monologues are doing pretty well. This season, they're actually more than triple the monologues last season in terms of views. Same as the weekend update guests. We've had 2 huge guest spots this season in terms of views with Deion Sanders and Jada Pinkett Smith, which currently are both over 2.5 million. So those are sort of the major things that I see here.
Yeah, and I'm sure SNL must be thrilled about this. This is exactly what they want. It's another revenue stream also to bring in money from the YouTube channel and get more views on the show. So I think this is good. And it probably also continues the general trend that we've been seeing year to year, which is that, there's less SNL viewers that are watching on traditional television and more that are going to check out the sketches the next day. So I think just everything is going right to increase views here. I will be very curious, let's say in 2024, when the new year comes around, if there's, SAG strike is done and there's new episodes of television being produced, if the general interest in Saturday Night Live goes down a little bit. But for now, I think it's a positive for all of us that more people are checking out the show.
Yeah. And, also 2024 is an election year. So even if there is a bit of a dip, I feel like people will come right back for, the Mikey Day versus probably JJ debate sketches.
Yeah, 100%. So thanks for bringing that to us, Eric. We were expecting another patron, but they didn't show yet. So Eric, if you want to stick around, I'd love if you want to join us and answer some more questions from the audience.
Sure thing.
All right, let's do it. So let me bring up that question document and I will go through that. Okay, let's take this question here from at Justice for Augustus Gloop. Says, do you think the writers have a take on Biden? If not, how will it influence the 2024 debate? So yeah, this was a big topic of conversation last week where we found out that Mikey was playing Biden. Do you think the writers have a take on Biden, or have they started to figure it out with Mikey? So what was your take on all of that, Eric?
I think their take on Biden is he's old and somewhat senile, but somewhat self-aware at his own senileness, whatever the noun of that is. Definitely not as good of a take as they've had on, the last several presidents. And I don't know that they're going to find it in time to make something really interesting, but I'm excited to see where they go with Mikey.
Yeah, I am excited for seeing how they'll do with Biden in the debate setting, because we only did see the Jim Carrey Biden in that sense. And now it'll be interesting to see how people work off of Biden in real life and how SNL takes those moments and turns them into SNL moments. I think that gives the writers the time to shine if they could really hit it. So like, the ball's lobbed, can they hit the home run? I will be fascinated to see how they do off of each other. Sammy, what do you think? Does SNL have a take on Biden, and what are you looking forward to with Biden in 2024?
I don't think at this moment that they necessarily do. I would be really curious to hear kind of, how soon, prior to last week's episode, they kind of decided to pivot to Mikey, or if this is something going into the season, both JJ and Mikey kind of knew, this was kind of what we were going to do. And, that would have determined kind of how much time Mikey and the writers had to kind of, put the character together. But they've kind of, we saw that graphic that was posted, that you guys posted on Instagram. Like, there's been so many people just in recent years who've played Biden, to where, I feel like the performance and the writing, they kind of go hand in hand, and you kind of have to, work on that together. And if you have to keep kind of hitting the reset button every time, oh, Jim Carrey's out, we're going to throw Alex Moffat in. Oh, JJ's here. Like, I can see why they don't necessarily have a good take. I think if they kind of, stick with Mikey, I think there is a good chance that they can, by the time, fall of season 50 rolls around, that they really have something. But I don't think at the moment they have anything more than, kind of old guy. And, obviously, Biden has changed a lot since the Jason Sudeikis' Biden days, but they had a strong take on what Biden was then. And I just don't think
that was my favorite Biden, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But that's not who he is now. So just trying to figure out, how to, kind of progress that. It's definitely a challenge when you have somebody who's kind of iconic for, having that impression, and so much time has passed. So I think Mikey can do it. And he's a writer. I know he's not, I don't know how involved he is necessarily in, like, the political side of things with SNL, but he can, write a sketch. So I'm sure him and Streeter, whoever, can, kind of come up with something.
We shall see. I think it'll be very interesting to watch what happens. And if I had to guess, I think that the decision to give the Biden impression to Mikey was made over the summer. I don't think it was something that happened between week 2 and 3. That's not actually insider knowledge. That's just me, pure speculation. But I think to make that decision, I think perhaps came from JAJ, perhaps it came from the writers or the producers, whatever it is. But I'm sure we'll find out eventually. But I have to imagine that Mikey had been preparing to do this impression throughout the summer, and it was something that, there's just a lot of moving parts with it. And I think, when they hired JJ and they knew he was going to do Biden that first episode of season 47, and it was such a big deal, I think the show had been looking for a Biden, and that had been in their plans. And I think that when they get together every single summer to decide what they're going to do with their cast, they think about decisions like this. So I have to imagine this was in the works for a little bit.
Do you think there was a strategy on executing it in the third episode, versus the first or the second?
Look, I think if it wasn't for the war in the Middle East, I think they would have probably done this at the premiere, because it would create conversation.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, so I have to think that would be the premiere. What did they do for the second episode for the Bad Bunny cold open again? Do we remember?
They did Jim Jordan.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that was obviously a big news story that week to decide who the Speaker of the House was going to be. So I guess it didn't really have a place for it there. But if they, I guess at that point that they weren't going to do it in the premiere, they had to pick and choose their spots. And I'm happy that they did this. So there wasn't, if Mikey was told he was playing Biden and then he had to wait till November to play him, I think it's probably a little bit more nerve-wracking for him. So that's what I assume.
Yeah. And
Eric,
I'm
you sent in a question this week.
Sorry, I was going to say I'm excited to see what they do, because obviously, I know that the first episode's cold open doesn't really count, but I thought the Mikey cold open was easily by far the best cold open of the season and one of the better political cold opens in some time. So I think, even the impression isn't fully formed, or the take, I still think, there's something that they can do to, kind of, there's potential there.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what they do.
Eric, you sent us in a question. Should we answer your question on the show? Because I think it'd be fun to talk about.
Sure, let's go for it.
All right. So, Eric, you sent in, does this season so far feel very male heavy? We had exclusively male hosts, so we did talk about that a little bit before you jumped on with us. And then the male cast has dominated most of the sketches. Ego's the highest woman in the cast in the power rankings at 6. So, yeah, like Mikey's obviously clearly dominated the power rankings if you've been catching up with by the numbers. So, the most of the men dominating these sketches so far this season. Look, I don't know if it feels very male heavy. I once asked the question on a By the Number show a couple years ago. I was like, hey, Mike, can you let me know if when a man hosts the show, does the male cast end up being very, very involved versus the women of the show, or vice versa? And he went through like all of the episodes he had done screen time on, and he found no correlation between like men and women hosting the show versus men in the cast or women in the cast being more involved. But I could imagine that people would feel that way based on the fact that we've always seen men host the show this season, that people feel like the cast is more and the sketches are more from a male perspective. I don't know. Sammy, what do you think?
I mean, that's interesting. I don't think it necessarily feels that way. It feels a little bit more split to me, as far as men versus women, but maybe the numbers don't say that. I do think, and I know it's already been, season plus since they all left, but we are coming off of an era that was so female dominated that I do wonder if, our perception of the episodes now, because things are maybe a little bit more balanced than they were, during the Kate, Cecily, 80 era, that's maybe why it's coming off of that way. And obviously with the male hosts, even if there's not necessarily a correlation, through the the stats there, that that ends up being the case. I do feel like some of the more memorable moments of the season, Washington's Dream, that's obviously an all male sketch cast. The Bad Bunny sketch with Marcelo, that was all in Spanish. I think that's an all male cast as well, for the most part. So I do feel like maybe the highlights have steered that way, but I said on the Nate Bargatze episode that I really like Sarah Sherman's Fran Drescher moment, even though that seemed like it wasn't super popular. I like that. So there certainly have been those moments for me, but I do feel like it's a little bit more split for my viewing.
Yeah, to counter that, we do have Glamgina and the Convent Meeting sketches. So those were two women, driven sketches, I guess. But Eric, you do feel like it's mostly like the show is being told mostly from a male perspective?
I mean, I think it's too early to tell how the whole season will go. Obviously, I think kind of the major thing is that because there's so much focus on, bouncing the cast members off the host, that even when there are a lot of women present in the sketch, they're still bouncing off of the male host. So it kind of like, takes away from, the feeling that it's more of a woman-led sketch. In general, we definitely have had fewer women-led sketches. I think in the Pete episode, we just had Glamgina and then the Heidi character.
Right.
In the next one, we had Punky and then the nun sketch. And then last episode, we had Ego on Update and then Sarah. Or no, that was the one before.
Yep, Sarah with the trick or treat.
Sarah and then Sarah again.
Yeah, and then Punky and Heidi both had update pieces that were cut from week number 3. So,
right.
Again, those moments could have materialized, but they didn't. Okay, well, Eric, thank you for joining us tonight and sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate getting to catch up with you, and hopefully you'll have you on every Patron Feedback Show this season, because I just find you're such an interesting person. You have such a great mind for the show, so thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, John, and nice to meet you, Sammy.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Great talking to you.
You too.
All right, buddy, we'll have you on soon. Thanks, Eric. Okay, let's bring in another patron of ours joining us on the show tonight, and that is our friend Ian. So, Ian, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Welcome on into the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So how are you enjoying the season so far, Ian?
I'm actually really enjoying the season. I laughed a lot more than I expected to, especially coming off of the strike. I was unsure what we were going to get, but I'm pleasantly surprised and happy with it.
Do you have a favorite episode so far this season?
I think the Nate episode, because he is one of my favorite stand-ups, and a lot of the sketches were like written like in his style, and I loved that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, Ian, we have like a ton of questions left to answer from the listener, so I'd love if you could help us do that tonight.
Yeah, I'll try my best.
Okay. All right. So, Sammy, Ian, let's get to some more questions and we'll get more thoughts. And of course, if you in the chat would like to submit any questions to us as well, let us know. All right. This one comes in from Stanley Kubrick's Macaulay Culkin, who asks, with the show still willing to play with the format by giving PDD an intro credit, what else do you think SNL should experiment with for its format? So they basically, in the montage, we got to see that PDD is now, it's a film by PDD, is in the opening montage. Sammy, is there anything else that you want to play with the format with SNL?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, obviously back in, the original days, SNL was a lot more of a variety show. You would have, stand-ups or magicians or, animated, shorts come in. So, I mean, I don't see the modern era typically, trying to do something like that. I mean, obviously, having, if the Please Don't Destroy didn't have like their own segment in the intro, I feel like we wouldn't necessarily look at it as like so experimental or so different for what the show does in modern times. I mean, yeah, they're writers, so that's a little different, but I do feel like it's, we've had in recent years, pre-tapes from, people who weren't, maybe necessarily in the cast per se, but I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing them like bring in like, more comedians to kind of, try stuff out. I just don't necessarily see that happening. But I'm always open to, the idea of them experimenting more.
Yeah, I like runners. I feel like that's something that I really wish they would do more of throughout the show. I think that you should lean into it when they have something like that available. Ian, what about you? Anything that you'd like to experiment with the format with if you could produce SNL today?
Well, I mean, I like the way they're going, but I feel like with the digital age coming, I'm afraid there's only so much you can change before it changes the live aspect of the show. And that kind of would ruin it. So, I mean, I do like what we're having with the pre-tapes and all that because they're always great and they're getting better with the technology. But as far as changing up the format, I mean, I agree with more comedians and stuff and bringing in random like people who don't really do or aren't really in entertainment, like athletes. I think is fun sometimes. Sometimes they're really fit. Like I thought Travis Kelce was really fun. So I just think like that, like bringing not always actors, like high end superstars in. I like bringing randoms in because it's interesting to see what they can do.
Yeah, I agree. I was surprised, honestly. We didn't even talk about this tonight. I was very surprised they went with Timothy Chalamet and Jason Momoa, given everything that's been going on with the SAG strike. I thought we were for sure going to get more musicians or athletes. I know that most professional sports are either just finishing their season or in season now, so it's not the best time to book an athlete. But still, I was just surprised they didn't go more outside the box. And clearly, what's going to happen is if the SAG strike isn't, and I guess negotiations are like really right now just starting to like ramp up and potentially cross that finish line. But if things are not resolved by the Saturday, I think Timothy Chalamet is not going to mention Doom 2, not going to mention Wonka, and then Moa is like not going to mention Aquaman either. So it's kind of like they are promoting the show, like the movies, but they're not going to say anything. Like I just think the whole thing is kind of weird.
It's such a fine line there because I feel like if things were normal, you would maybe see Chalamet do some sort of like maybe not a Wonka sketch, but something kind of in the vein of that. And I wonder, they're probably not going to want to touch that, with everything going on with the strike. So I am curious how that's just maybe one small example of how it could impact the episode, but promoting without promoting is, that's kind of what's happening.
Yeah. Let's take this next question that comes in from Vicky Higgs, better known as Victor Higgins. I see you, Victor, in the chat. So thanks for joining the show tonight. What do you think of, or here he says, would you call the George Washington sketch a classic or future classic? Love the pod and the many Andrews that come into our SNL fan base. Well, thanks for that, Victor. So would you call the George Washington sketch a classic or future classic? Ian, what do you think?
I always find that an interesting topic for anything like cars, music. Like, when does it actually become a classic? But I think it could be. I mean, I just love Nate's comedy. Maybe that's just a biased opinion, but I think that it's an instant classic, I guess, because I already watched like a lot of those sketches, some of my favorites just before this, and it still made me laugh the same way every time. So I'm hoping that it ages like that as time goes on.
I think it has classic material written all over it because there is two kinds of classic. There's classic in like our community where we're watching every single sketch and then we're like, okay, this one is a really good sketch. And then there's classic that goes beyond our superfan community. And those are the ones that you can send to anybody, even if they tell you that SNL isn't funny, and they'll watch that sketch and they'll be like, okay, this was kind of funny. I'll give you like, this one was funny. And I think this is that sketch because this is like, as long as you're in North America, that sketch is funny to you. So I like, or at least have traveled in and out of the States at some point. So I think that has classic written all over it. And I think it's going to be, at the end of the season, we're only 3 episodes in like a 20 episode season. I think that this is still going to end up being in the top 5 sketches of the season towards the end of the year. What do you think, Sammy?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And as far as like how it's kind of, gotten out of the SNL bubble, I do feel like, going on Twitter, like, a couple days after the episode, I saw a lot of people who aren't necessarily like, I think people in their own tweets would say, like, I'm not even a huge SNL fan. And this is like some of the best, things I've seen from, that show in years. So I think it's definitely kind of, reached people outside of the SNL community. Eric, showing us his, numbers from the YouTube viewership. I think it was number 3 as far as, sketches, this season. And I know it's early, so we'll see kind of throughout the season, how much bigger that number grows. And if it kind of, stays towards the top as far as most viewed sketches for the season. And I also think there is like a timelessness to the sketch. The fact that, even though it's like a period piece, it takes place, during the Revolutionary War, But I think that aspect of it and not being so topical or, touching on stuff that's happening now, I think is going to just add to the replayability of it. You don't have to be in a certain moment in time or have been alive at a certain moment to kind of get the references. So I think it has kind of all the makings of something that can become a classic.
Yeah, and in case you enjoy our content, you may have missed out if you're not a patron of ours that we did an extra podcast. We've been doing them every week just for the patrons called the SNL Sketch Breakdown. And this week, the patrons voted for that sketch for us to break down. And I had TJ Randolph on with me. We went about 45 minutes talking about all the lines of that sketch. And it's a really, really fun show. So if you want to go check that out at our Patreon site, that's available now.
Can I say 2 more things?
Sure, of course. Anything.
Well, one thing, as he was talking, I just thought, imagine if somehow the United States just decided to throw everything out and go with the metric system. Do you think that would make that sketch funnier in the future, or make it like not as funny as time went on?
Interesting. So if the US like ripped up everything and was like, we really like what Canada does that make that sketch completely pointless at this point? What do you think, Sammy?
No, I think it adds to the lore of this sketch because I feel like there would be like, conspiracy theories or people online just being like, oh, they did this because of SNL. Like they, saw this sketch. They're like, you know what, this is actually stupid. And then that was the reason for why they totally, decided to adopt the metric system. So I think, that would, if in this hypothetical scenario, I think, it would make the sketch even more kind of infamous or legendary.
It reminds me a lot of like when I watch things from like 10 or 15 years ago that are like smoking weed is bad. Like you're going to get arrested for smoking weed. And then like everything is like now like the government has marijuana stores, like it's just like things change in the world. And then we could like look back at like stuff that, I mean, look, this to me is like pretty benign. Like it's stupid the way that things are done, and it's something that we could laugh at. So I think no matter when it changes, no matter what period in history you're looking at it, you could laugh at something like this. So I think it's a great question, Ian. Did you have another stray thought on the sketch?
Well, I had just watched most of that breakdown video.
Yeah.
And TJ mentioned if Jason Momoa had delivered that line talking about the Washington Dream, I'm like, was that announced yet? I don't think it was. So he kind of like predicted the future a little bit.
Yeah, it was not announced, and TJ did not know about Momoa. We actually only found out about Momoa. I think Chalamet we knew for a while, and Momoa we only found out last night. So that was So that was completely like predicted by TJ. He incepted that into the season.
It's hilarious. Good for him.
Yeah. Okay, let's take this next question from our friend Monette, who asked, does there have to be a PDD short every episode? Will we see diminishing returns due to them focusing all their energy towards a short and possible sketches? So I think, let's address that first part. Does there have to be a PDD short every episode, or will we get diminishing returns, Sammy?
Ooh, I think there shouldn't have to be, and like I think they shouldn't just automatically necessarily get a spot on the show. I think at the end of the day you have to do what is best for the show. But then when I think of that, then I look at, well, Weekend Update is a permanent fixture at the show. There would never be a week at SNL to where, and I know obviously that's been around since day one, there would never be a week where it's like, all right, the jokes suck this week, so we're just gonna not do Weekend Update. So, but I still think this is a different, obviously a different scenario from that. And I think if you don't have the goods, or there's something that you're thinking about cutting that works better in dress, I think you don't necessarily need to see it every week.
Yeah, I was just looking on Wikipedia. Like, there's been many episodes throughout Lonely Island's time where they didn't have digital shorts in specific episodes, and there's even 6 sketches that I see here from 2006 to 2009 that were just dress rehearsal shorts. So yeah, I mean, look, if the quality isn't there, I don't think that PDD should get preferential treatment and say like, oh, we have to put them in the episode. But if they got something good, I mean, what I'll say is like PDD shorts, if they're not good enough for the show, should definitely at least be put online. That's like definitely a cut for time thing that needs to go up, but I don't need them all to make the show. What do you think, Ian?
Yeah, as much as I enjoy them every time I see them, I don't think it's necessary to be there. But it's almost like they're honorary cast members without being cast members, which I don't know. I mean, it's fine, I guess. But I enjoy seeing, like I said, I enjoy seeing it when I do see it. But like you said, online would be fine, even if it was like a YouTube exclusive or something, just to draw more people there, since they're not actually cast members. And that way you can still bring in the younger viewers or whoever is not going to catch the live show. I think that's a good way to draw internet attention. And it's still a way, maybe even to go back to the format question, is have like a online only segment. Well, not online only, but have certain sketches. Like if they're not in an episode, have an online exclusive or whatever. Yeah,
you're speaking my language now, by the way, because like when you get into like the format changes, which I didn't really get into all this, but like I have a lot of format changes that I would love SNL to make, but they're mostly like post Lorne format changes that I don't think would ever happen in the Lorne era, like putting dress rehearsal completely online for people to watch, having an actual NBC pregame show and NBC postgame show. Like I think there's a lot of things that like the show needs to do to embrace fans post season 50 that I think would be really, really fun. But I think those are all like maybe, towards like when the show reimagines itself in a few years. But I agree. Yeah. Just for the simple, staying just talking about PDD, I definitely don't think it's a must, but I do think that so far their quality level has been good enough that if we got out of 20 episodes, we got 17 or 18 PDDs. I don't think that's that crazy. Okay. Next question that comes in is from our friend Ken George Jones, who's in the chat with us tonight. So, hey, Ken. Ken says, for cast use so far in season 49, what has been your most pleasant surprise and what has disappointed you? So, Ian, do you have a cast member this season that has really surprised you that you've seen them so much, and maybe one that has disappointed you that you wish you would have seen more?
I don't know if I was surprised. Well, I don't know if surprised is the right word. I was happy to see more of Punky, even though it's still not a lot of Punky, but we're still seeing a little bit more in the start. Would love more Sarah, because I just like her goofiness. Well, I would love more Sarah is what I would like the crazy out of left field Sarah. So that would be fun. I mean, even just, I like her Fran. That was fun to see.
Yeah.
Getting
I agree with your choices, though. Those are really good choices. Sammy, what do you think?
Well, yeah, Ian stole my pick with Punky. I mean, I've been just so happy to see the stuff she's been able to produce on the show, and the sketch in the Bad Bunny episode. What's her character's name again? Tuna Una, or
yeah, I don't think her character is Tuna.
Yeah,
Tuna Una.
that's
I
not.
think it's
it was Latina
Jefferson. I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, that was fantastic. Another person I've been pleasantly surprised about is definitely Andrew Dismukes, just because last season was kind of rough for him. So I'm glad that he's kind of gotten his own sort of pieces on the show, and Lake Beach has become some semi-viral, I would say. Like, I know they added it on Spotify, so that's always exciting to see. I want SNL to do more of that. And I mean, I think my biggest sort of disappointment, or somebody that I'd like to see more of, is my guy Mikey Longs. I feel like we're still kind of waiting, especially after last season. It really felt like, he was kind of off to a great start. The barbershop sketch with Chappelle, I thought, was such a great use of like his voice, and him kind of being able to anchor that was so great. I'm looking for that moment in these next 2 episodes coming up from Mikey Longs, because I saw him over the summer do stand-up, and he was just so funny. So I just need to see that in a live sketch from him very soon.
I totally echo your sentiments, and I agree about Punky. Has been like such a pleasant surprise. I ended up taking Punky in the draft just because like I was trying to like give her that good luck, and we got it so far. So she's been very good. If you do follow her, so I don't know if any of you guys are especially people in chat, are Instagram people, but there's this feature called Instagram channels, where if you follow somebody with like enough like a big enough profile, you can subscribe to their personal channel on Instagram. And Punky has her own channel there called Get Funky with Punky. And she posts some like videos where she's like sitting in the office talking about some of the sketches she's working on. And she had a really, really like interesting moment where she posted on, I think this must have been earlier today, 11:30 this morning, Eastern time. She posted 2 videos, how I horrifically bombed my update piece last week. And she talks about how, her sketch that she produced, or her segment she produced for Update, which was like Michael Che's ex-girlfriend or whatever it was. And then she talks about like why it didn't work and how she bombed at Dress and what she's hoping to do to it moving forward. And I just like love that transparency from a cast member. I think it's exactly what you need to succeed on the show, because we're all going to root for you if you're able to be like open and willing to talk about these things that maybe you do get on the show and why they got on, and then ones that didn't as well. So for anyone who loves SNL, I think that's a really interesting aspect of the cast members and what they're doing. And Punky, thanks for doing that. All right, let's do one more question with Ian here. We'll take this one from Fred. Fred asks, do you predict an influx of returning cast members and classic hosts towards this end of this season and next as we start to near 50? Do you think there's any risk to this? So do you think that as we're starting to get the excitement rolling, the ball's on its way, we're heading towards that big 50th anniversary moment, do we think that SNL is going to start bringing in some really big names, Ian?
Well, I mean, the season's already pretty cameo heavy to start, so it wouldn't surprise me if they brought in a lot of like SNL alumni cameos like toward 50. I definitely won't be surprised to see some hosts. I had some predictions that I was hoping for, not for any particular reason, but I would love to see Amy Poehler come back really soon. I don't even know if she has anything going on, especially with the strike. Who knows? But it would just be fun to see her. But I don't think it would be detrimental. But I still like to see the newcomers and the newbies who not everybody knows. But it's hard to say with 50 approaching. You never know what they want to promote and bring back. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Sammy, what do you think?
Well, I think as SNL super fans, that's what we all want to see. I think we want all of SNL season 50, not just, whatever primetime special they do similar to SNL 40. I think we all want the entire year to be a celebration of SNL. And I think that includes the legacy cast members, iconic hosts. So that's what I want to see. I do feel like, we might not get that for all 20 episodes. I feel like we'll probably still get, whoever's got a movie opening or whatever, and maybe they'll gear it more towards, if, I don't know, Adam Sandler has a new movie or somebody. But I'm really hoping that, we get some, iconic people in there. I'm curious how deep they'll go. Are they going to focus on, bring in like the really big names, or, I feel like, John, you've mentioned in the past, like being able to see like Lorraine and Jane host like an episode or something like that. I mean, that would be so cool to see like some OG cast members in there. But, I'm hoping they, listen to the fan community and have some big stuff planned for SNL 50.
Yeah, I think we have so much time to talk about what they're going to do for season 50. And I'm sure the questions are going to keep coming in as we head towards the end of the season. But the producers, though they have their plans, are, still making a show in season 49. And I think that they may save a couple of people, like, the Lorraine Jane combo. If that was ever going to materialize, it would make more sense to do it next year than this year. But if there was a big name alumni that they wanted to bring back that they've been trying to, I think they would still put them in season 49. And then if they wanted to cameo in 50, that's fine too. So I wouldn't be surprised if we got a few big names in season 49 that they weren't just holding out, including at the Christmas show, potentially for the finale. So I would expect other alumni besides Pete Davidson to pop up this season. I would be very, very surprised if they went the entire season and Pete was their only alumni host. All right, Ian. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Is there anything else you want to talk about from season 49?
Well, I also want to say thank you for having me, but
Of course, yeah.
I don't know, just it's been good so far, and I hope they keep going in the direction. Would also love to see some more women host. There's some that I would like to see specifically, like who have things going on, like Taylor Tomlinson would be nice. She's in the news lately, but we'll see. I don't know. I did predict I didn't predict, but I thought Boy Genius, when they mentioned on Weekend Update, was going to be like a spoiler, and it ended up being a spoiler. Because I was like, I'm hoping to see them, and sure enough, because I love Boy Genius, so and I don't know who this other person is, Tate McRae. I've heard the name, but I don't know who they are.
So Tate McRae is Canadian and is very, very popular, like getting really popular on TikTok. Super popular as like a pop singer, and becoming, just like I said, she's on the rise. So I think it totally makes sense. She is probably the least known musical guest so far this season, but I was not surprised when I saw her name, because there's a lot of viral videos that have Tate McRae in it now, and she's really starting to like take over the pop scene.
I'll have to look into her music then.
Yeah, I'll recommend. She has a very good song with Tiesto right now. That's very popular.
All right.
But, well, Ian, yeah, very excited for you to join us again down the road. So hope you'll continue to sign up for these shows, and thanks for your support.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me.
Of course, we'll talk soon.
Nice talking to you.
All right, Sammy K. We have a few more questions to get to before we wrap up tonight. So you cool to rapid fire a few more of these? All right, let's do it. Okay, let's talk about this next question that came in from our old friend Ike Moore. Ike, hope you're well, man. Ike says, this is more of a general question, but do you think sometimes the more big named hosts can have a hard time letting their ego down and enjoy the host experience? I felt Bad Bunny's episode was way better than last season's Make the Stallion episode, because Bad Bunny, I feel, was more willing to play and didn't care as much about his brand. Side note, this is why I can never imagine Beyonce ever hosting. What do you think of that?
Ooh, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there are situations where, I mean, SNL is a big task, for somebody to come in there and kind of play in that sandbox. So I imagine that that's something that goes into it. And, maybe if you have a better sense of humor or whatever, that could help you be able to poke more fun at yourself. But I mean, Beyonce is an interesting poll. I do feel like there was a time, maybe, 10 years ago, where that could have happened. But I do feel like and maybe this is kind of adding to his question, to where there is a point where you become such a big brand that, maybe it's less so an ego thing. It's more just like, that sounds like a lot of work, or that doesn't sound like fun to, do SNL. An example that comes to mind is Taylor Swift, obviously like the biggest, pop star celebrity in the world right now. She's hosted the show before, but that was when she was kind of up and coming, on the rise. I'd be really curious if she'd ever host again. I mean, I think that'd be cool to see, but I do feel like that's an example of somebody who maybe, because their brand is so big at this point, they're not going to want to do that now.
I think it's a great question, Ike. I don't know that we would always notice on the outside who, as a host, would be like too cool to, play along. I think maybe it would appear in some of the sketches, and maybe there's stories that come out later on. But like, I think where you would really see it would be if you worked at the show and you try and do stuff with the hosts, and then they're just not so game. Like they wouldn't do certain roles. You have to sort of push them to do different things. I think Beyonce is an interesting example, where when Bobby Moynihan was on with us, she was talking about, talking to us about how they tried to get the Beyonce to do that single lady sketch, and it wasn't until Justin Timberlake said that he was in that she would do it. So I think like you're on point, where Beyonce might be like a little bit more difficult. I had heard that Lizzo was like a little bit more difficult behind the scenes, but I don't know that we saw it like outside of Studio 80H. I think the episode, like, I don't think anybody walked away from that episode feeling like, oh, Lizzo wasn't game for any of these sketches. But I think there was like a little bit of a feeling internally that she, came in and wasn't as open as some of the other, double duty hosts. At least that's what I've heard. So it's an interesting thing to think about when, unless you ask somebody who was there, you don't really know how that experience goes. All I'll say for Bad Bunny is that I do feel having Pedro Pascal there made him probably more open to doing things than if he was just on his own. And the show like really upped their quality by having Pedro there.
Yeah, and going back to the Megan Thee Stallion of it all, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, that was like a cameo-less sort of episode. Like, I don't think there was really any appearances from everybody else, any other celebrities. So, it didn't really have that same thing as Bad Bunny to wear to kind of, lighten the load per se.
Yeah, I think like if I remember correctly, Megan Thee Stallion was like previously in She-Hulk right before she hosted. And everyone was like, oh, this is so exciting. Like, she was so great in She-Hulk. She's going to be so fantastic. And then when you watch the episode, it was very much like, it was just like, it felt like a different show, if I'm being completely honest. And that may be a good thing for you as a viewer. But for me, it was like so in the other direction of trying to tailor the episode to the host. That's why I didn't feel it was as strong as some of the other ones that were around it. But I think they struck a really good balance with Bad Bunny, even if he wasn't the strongest host himself.
Yep.
Okay. Next question from our friend Will Norman, who asks, you have the power to guarantee more screen time to one cast member moving forward this season. Who gets the time?
I mean, I don't want to keep saying Michael Longfellow, but I really
it's
feel
a good
like,
answer, honestly.
I really feel like he just has such a unique, at least amongst his cast, such a unique sort of voice and tone that is my type of humor. I know he's compared to Norm a lot, but just like that kind of, dry, sarcastic sort of thing. Like, I would love to see kind of more of that mean-spiritedness in sketches. And I think, he would bring that.
Yeah, Michael Longfellow only in 5 sketches so far this season. I tend to agree. Yeah, I think so. Surprisingly, Keenan has been not at the top of the ranks this season so far, and I think that's the right amount for him. I think that probably Chloe Fineman's been the other one that's been down a little bit so far metrics wise, but I think that's probably she's sort of settled in at the right spot for her. So I think they're doing a lot of things right this season. Very strong metrics for a lot of people. Mikey is the one who's shot up the ranks, but I think, like I said, Sarah, Punky, Andrew, Michael Longfellow, like those are the ones who I would consider for a question like this. So yeah, those are the ones that are on my mind. Will also asked, if this is the same Will, asks, what's been your biggest pleasant surprise early in the season? A moment, a cast member, or a sketch, anything that really, really surprised you so far, Sammy?
Ooh, that's a good question. This really surprised me. Honestly, for as much kind of talk we had about Pete, towards like the end of his career on SNL, like I really think he like brought it to his episode. Like, I don't think it was the best episode of the season, but I think he did, different things that he didn't necessarily always do as a cast member, at least towards the end of his run. And it was kind of nice to see him, be in all the sketches, because, there'd be moments where he wouldn't be in, certain episodes towards the end of his run. So that was surprising, especially when we first heard that he was hosting maybe the end of last year. We were all kind of speculating like, oh, is he even going to be in all the sketches or anything like that? So I'm glad that Pete came to play.
Yeah, I think for me, I wasn't surprised about that. I think that he, was booked to do the episode in the spring, and then it was waiting months to do this episode. I'm not surprised that he brought it, because I saw in our first season of coverage here on the podcast that there were many episodes in season 46 that were elevated by Pete Davidson. And you have to go back and you find, like, it wasn't the best season, but there were some episodes that were better because Pete really, really tried. So I know that Pete has it in him. He's probably one of the biggest effort, cast members in the history of the show. When he wants to bring it on the show, he could be a top 50 cast member in the history of the show. When he doesn't, he could be a bottom 50 cast member in the history of the show. And there's not many cast members that I could give that to. Like, it's really crazy how much he fluctuates from episode to episode as a cast member. And I felt good about him coming in. I really felt like it was a very strong premiere. I think Nate's episode was better for sure, but I think you can't like hate what he did. Like if you had a problem with the premiere, I don't think it was with Pete. So for me, that was a good call, Sammy. I think my biggest surprise definitely is Mikey as Biden. I was given no indication before the season that that role was going to
Yeah.
go to Mikey Day. And the fact that it was is just so like crazy to me. And I love like a good kind of crazy because I love Mikey over the last couple of years. I love what he's bringing to the show. I just think whatever happened, I like one day we'll ask him, but like Alex Moffat, Melissa, all the people that left, 80, Kate Cecily, like they all leave the show. And like it feels like the shackles were lifted off of Mikey Day. Like he just like became this new person. In season 42, during his first season as a cast member, I think he had one of the better first seasons of like in the history of the show as a cast member. And then he disappears and falls into that like Don Jr. role and Mikey Day Streeter sketches that you could just read what they are the second that they start for years. And like all of a sudden, this guy like Undertaker meme just like woke up, like it was like it's been crazy. So I'm just utterly impressed with him. And whether he pushed for this role or the show has given it to him, he's gonna have such a strong season 49 that right now, I think if you're watching the greatest cast member of all time countdown, he came in like the late 40s. Like he could shoot up those rankings, like really could end up being like a top 35, top 30 if he has an amazing 49. Like I'm just so impressed with Mikey.
Yeah, that's a much better answer because I was like, unfortunately, that was spoiled for me on Twitter, I believe. That
But you didn't
he
watch
was going to
live.
be bad. I didn't watch it live. The one episode this
Shame.
season I didn't watch live. I was at a Halloween party, but and then I saw that happen and I was like, oh wow. And then Christopher Walken, another big surprise. That's another thing that was surprising. I never thought I'd see him back at Studio 8H during a live episode, but yeah, no, that was certainly a surprise, and I'm excited to kind of see where that goes.
All right, let's take this last question. This also comes from our friend Ken in the chat, who said it was striking to see Sarah have two big parts in the Halloween episode with no gore content. Do you think she has just chosen to take a step back on what is easier to get on air? I'd wondered if that last somewhat crazy sketch she got on, the roller coaster sketch from the Michael B. Jordan episode, got any backlash, especially since it aired very early in the episode. So yeah, we've really pivoted away from like traditional Sarah Sherman or Sarah Squirm sketches. Do you have any indication as to why they might be doing that, Sammy?
I'm not sure. I mean, maybe as a cast member, maybe somewhat similar to how when JJ first started on the show, he's known as the impression guy. Is he going to be the next Daryl Hammond, not wanting to be pigeonholed into one thing and kind of challenging yourself to do more things? And JJ's been able to do that really successfully. And, Sarah Sherman, also that obviously all of the body horror stuff is a big niche and can also affect your ability to produce and get things on the show. So I think it's a possibility that she's maybe just from a strategic standpoint trying to go away from that stuff. It is kind of surprising that in a Halloween episode that just does seem like the perfect time if she did have something cooking to kind of get that on the show. So I don't know. I mean, over the weekend just saw her in that Adam Sandler Bat Mitzvah movie that came out a couple months ago. And, she's, playing a rabbi, playing a role that is totally, oh yeah, it was super cute, super fun. But she was easily the best part of the movie. So she, obviously that is how she kind of, made her mark in the comedy world, but, she's able to do so many different things. So I think she's maybe just flexing those muscles and challenging herself to get kind of other kind of stuff on the show.
Yeah, my only theory for this is potentially there is so much work that goes into those gore sketches. You have to build the props, there's costumes, there's set design, things will get messy. And you, as Sarah, probably put so much into that sketch in a week, writing it and then doing all the rehearsals, that if it gets cut, you actually may like not end up in the rest of the show because that sketch requires so much of an investment. You may not be in like 3 or 4 other sketches that night. So I have to wonder if maybe it's not worth it if there's not like such a strong idea there, where it's because I've heard about these sketches being like cut many weeks throughout 47 and 48, that like if it gets cut, like that was like, okay, Sarah's sketch is cut, and then like what else is she in? She plays like bit roles and other things. So maybe it's just that, it's unlike other cast members where if they have a character that's written around them and it gets cut, it's so easy to bring back another week. Whereas like them having to build like a set that can be filled up with blood is not as easy to do with, I don't know. That would be like just a guess. Okay, well, those are all of our questions for this week for our first feedback show of the season. So we're going to be doing these shows every time that we are wrapping up a run of episodes from season 49, and we'll have either a couple patrons call in or many patrons, depending on the time of the year and their availability. So you can always join us on these shows by signing up as a patron, and we'll put out a Google form for you to sign up and register for a time slot for these shows. And I'll also have a bunch of our regular panelists come on the show with us, like Sammy, to help answer these questions, and always enjoy getting to hear from everybody in the chat as well. So really appreciate everyone who hung out with us for our first feedback show of the season. Quick programming note that if you are checking in for our next edition of the SNL's Greatest Cast Members of All Time, that will air live on Wednesday this week. So Wednesday, November 8th, instead of Thursday. We're going to be on one day early this week. So you'll join us at 8 p.m. Eastern for that one. We have another great reveal to talk about, 3 more cast members. So that's very exciting. And then we have our hot take show live at 1:10 a.m. this Saturday night, right after Timothée Chalamet and Boy Genius's episode of Saturday Night Live. You can find all of our shows on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to never miss a show, and follow us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok, to see everything we're doing and all the great graphics we're going to be posting this week about Timmy Chalamet. Sammy, thanks for joining us. Where can the listeners check you out?
Sean, thanks for having me. You guys can find me at that Sammy K on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and also at Sammy Just Okay. Maybe I'll post something on there sometime soon. Maybe something. The Oscar season's coming up, so I'm just trying to get that. Yeah, November. Once November hits, I've already seen a couple things that are looking very promising, and then also, as always, the superfan takeovers. Please check those out if you have not. And I think I'm going to be on the hot take show on Saturday, right? Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, so much Sammy this week. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah. So if you're sick of me, well, you can see me on the hot take show as well. So thanks for having me, as always.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. So I look forward to seeing all of our friends in the chat on Saturday night after the show. And you can also find me at Jon Schneider 24 as well. On behalf of Sammy K and Eric and Ian, who joined us on the show, and all of our friends and patrons in the chat, my name is Jon Schneider from the SNN. We will see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.